This has been a video that I've been somewhat avoiding, but we probably need to delve into it. 40-pound mug, by the way. Did you hear that? That was a little too loud. I don't think that we're in a tariff war. I think we're in a capital war. This isn't about trade. It's about power. And because markets don't understand this, I don't think they're properly pricing it. So let's break it down. But before we break it down, let me be clear. The reason I've avoided this topic is because I want to seem as apolitical as possible, right? I don't want to try, I try my best not to see things through any sort of lens, all right? I listen to as many right-wing commentators as I do left-wing commentators. And before creating this video and trying to learn about tariffs, I listened to as many experts who loved them and as many experts who hated them, right? I did my historical due diligence, and then I went forward and listened to the specifics of the current administration and what their purported goals are, right? I listened to lots of experts, whether it was Darius Dale or Warren Pives or Scott Galloway or Gary Stevenson, or it was one of the many interviews on the topic that Maggie Lake has had, or it was Hugh Hendry and his topics, a plethora, right? The list goes on and on, dozens of people. And then I created my opinion, right? And when we talk about this, I want to try and push you, the viewer, to have an open mind about the topic, right? I'm a professional trader. My goal is to make money. Okay. And so understand that my goal is to only see these things through the most objective lens possible in a way that's going to help me make money. It has nothing to do with morals. It has nothing to do with ethics. I want to make money. I want to feed my family. That's all I care about, right? I'm not going to be like the mainstream media where their goal is to put provocative headlines so that they can make more ad revenue. And I'm also not a fund manager whose goal is to basically grift to, a certain part of the population to try and gain their funds, right? My goal is to make money and put it in my pocket and help you do the same. Take care of yourself so that you will hit the subscribe and like button and watch more of my content, right? So let's come at this with a learner's mindset. The goal of the tariffs, as reported by the current administration, was to basically boost U.S. national security, okay? It's a protection of not only the country through a reindustrialization, but also a protection of U.S. tech and IP, something that, China especially has been attempting to steal, especially with the new ban on NVIDIA chips, something that Biden had previously done to a certain extent, but like a lot of his plans had really poor execution and follow through, right? Not to say that this won't be any better. It could be just as bad, because all that's really been happening is we put the bans on, and then smaller Asian countries, great shell companies, order those NVIDIA chips and then send them to China. And we know that this is happening, at least to a certain extent, because Singapore even got caught doing so. And we can also simply use something like DeepSeek AI and see how good it is and know that the tech is pretty proficient. But there's also a big disconnect that we need to understand between the purported goals and the reality of what's happening, right? You're not going to reindustrialize America by creating this tariff war. It's not going to happen. We have a 4% unemployment rate. We don't even have a population large enough to actually fully staff our military, let alone staff warehouses. Remember, the reindustrialization of America means recreating new complex supply chains, which takes years, creating the actual factories necessary, creating the warehouses then to store them, hiring the workforce, and then training the workforce as well. This is a process that's going to take several decades, and an administration who has 4 years. And a lot of the things that they want to do are definitely going to hurt voters in the short term. So the idea that we would continue to vote in people who are going to continue to enact these very painful practices is next to zero. And I don't think our administration is so incompetent that they don't realize this. And I also think that people who are complaining about the damage to their reputation that we've done through the poor execution of these tariffs is completely accurate. But I think that is also intentional. But let's first establish why. We're going back and forth on these tariffs for goals that don't make sense, like the reindustrialization. Makes no sense, right? We're going back and forth. The tariffs are on and the tariffs are off. We're being very hawkish, then we're being very dovish. We're going to tariff the whole world, and actually we're going to do a 90-day pause, right? Wash on, wash off. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's very confusing. It's not being explained well to Americans. Imagine how other countries feel. They're even more in the dark, right? This actually incentivizes them to create more trade agreements with other countries. It's actually a massive restructuring of the global world order that has existed since World War II. Understand, it's a massive deal. It's a tectonic shifting that is occurring. But why are they doing it? You see, the uncertainty has caused the lessening of the credibility of the U.S., which has actually devalued the U.S. dollar. And it's a very tricky game to play for the Trump administration. Very ballsy, because you actually do automatically make all trade with the U.S. more favorable, and you do make us more money by lowering the value of the dollar through the destruction of our credibility. Something that probably can come back over a long time horizon. But if you push that down too much, you're going to lose your USD dominance, which is why we are so utterly dominant. It's because our currency is dominant, because most of the debt in the world is denominated in US dollars. Most countries trade in US dollars. It's been steadily dropping, and this is them trying to compensate for that drop by purposely lowering the value of the dollar, so that trade is more favorable for us. And then on top of that, Trump is trying to get countries to also purchase more things from the US through these agreements. These are not, obviously, in many cases, we don't have deficits of these countries, right? You can't call it a true deficit if this country just doesn't buy anything from us, especially when we're talking about like poor Asian countries or poor countries in Africa. They can't afford to buy goods from the US, and all we do is just buy certain, maybe particular unique raw materials from them for ourselves, because we don't make much, right? Which is fine to be an import nation, but it's made us very spoiled. It's another reason why we're not going to industrialize. Americans want to work in the gig economy. They want to work in entertainment. They want to be YouTube stars. They don't want to work factory jobs. Even if they were there, we would not do them. Know who would? Robots. So I don't want to get too derailed on that topic, but the goal really here is to devalue the dollar to make the trade more favorable, and do it in a way that's not too obvious, so that foreign actors can't put further pressure on it and then destroy USD dominance. Now, there's been some backfirings on this, right? China has been quick to realize this is just why they've been stacking gold so aggressively. India has even indicated that they want to do so as well. What these countries are actually doing is they're actually pegging their currency, their debt, to gold rather than pegging their debt to US dollar, which is the first step towards getting off the US dollar based system, right? Which is the true way that we have total utter dominance over the entire world, because we have the best currency, because we have the most credibility, because we have the best tech, and we have the biggest military. Of course, when you pick a fight with China, who sells you all the raw materials for your military, who backs your dollar, you do have a problem. So real outcomes for the tariffs don't really align with the reported goal of the tariffs, but the outcome of the uncertainty created by the tariffs does help us overall with our trade, even if we don't get the agreements we want. It's a roundabout way of playing a capital game that could help us, but it's really hard to imagine how it could help us in the long term. And that's where I feel like the economists that Trump has put on an administration have really had major failings. I have no idea how they plan to enact these goals. And even now, Trump is mad at Jerome Powell because he won't cut rates and then provide support to the economy. But the Federal Reserve is in a jam, right? We're in the midst of stagflation, which is why gold has gone so parabolic. Gold does not go parabolic in time periods of inflation. This can be easily seen by just looking at the chart. I mean, the most simplest thing in the world, right? Gold kind of went up during COVID when there was rampant inflation, and people were saying that the dollar is going to die. But the problem then was that everyone was also devaluing their currencies to the extent that we were. Everyone was printing money, and everyone had massive inflation, and gold stayed within a very long-term range. But now gold is breaking out to all-time highs. It's in a period of price discovery. This is because of persistent uncertainty from the loss of credibility and through stagflation, which we are currently in. With stagflation is when growth is on a decline or growth is stagnant and inflation is persistently high. That is the environment we've created, and that is an environment we might stick in for a prolonged period of time, especially when we're talking about the restructuring of the global world order. These aren't things that are going to take a really long time. And that's why gold has been going to the moon. You know, everyone's trying to get away from the US dollar. Everyone's trying to seek safety. And additionally, we're in stagflation. This is literally the most bullish parameters to send gold to the moon that we probably ever had. The only other time gold has gone this parabolic was back in the late 70s and early 80s, which again, gold price of gold doubled, almost tripled. And we're probably likely to see that right now. This is probably 1/3 of the way, maybe halfway through the real gold bubble. It's probably going to keep going up and up and up. The longer the tariffs are, the further it will probably run to the upside. If the US dollar continues to fall, if Trump plays this game too far, lowering the value of the US dollar should make trade more favorable. If he pushes that too far, gold will even go higher. And at some point, because I know my crypto crowd will want this at least touched on, at some point, this might play into Bitcoin. And I think it actually should worry crypto world a little bit that it hasn't. It seems like what we really need is for a reason to gold no longer work as the trade. Because what you really need is more institutions So that being different countries and central banks to be purchasing Bitcoin to get, the crazy $3 million target that Kathy Woods has proclaimed, right? To get that, you need this gold trade to stop working. So there needs to be some sort of event that disrupts that. What that looks like, I am not too sure. Maybe disruption in the trade, maybe a scientific discovery, maybe I think, and I know retail does not like this idea, but every hedge fund manager I've talked to, every researcher I've talked to, every, billion-dollar portfolio manager I've spoken to agrees with me on this, although your average Joe who works at Starbucks will say I'm an idiot, is that, space mining will be what is the best catalyst for Bitcoin. If we can mine raw materials in outer space, suddenly you need something that's coded to be scarce, because scarcity will suddenly be an infinite problem in an infinite expanding universe. If you have space travel, you have infinite resources, right? So, and that might take a really long time, right? The Bitcoin idea might be a very, very, very long-term idea. And if this type of environment with this level of uncertainty and lack of trust in institutions isn't enough to propel Bitcoin higher, maybe a war will do it. Again, gold will probably still service the role. So it's hard to imagine what will cause, the massive amount of capital inflows. I'm not saying Bitcoin can't go to 200K, but what sends Bitcoin to the moon, to use Wall Street bet type verbiage, would probably be something more significant. So that's something to be mindful of for you crypto guys. Keep in mind that, TradFi, as you'd call it, or traditional finance, still king. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover on tariffs. I kind of touched on each of my bullet points here kind of lightly. If you want to dive into the discussion with a little bit more depth, make sure you join the Discord and we can have a more extensive conversation about it. It's free to join the Discord. And I hope you guys learned something from this. Understand that we have another video also for what targets you should be looking for the market based on how long the tariffs stay enacted. But the big thing you should be mindful of is that the longer that these stay in place, the more destructive it's going to be to the economy. You could put I think a recession is about a coin flip right now. It's probably about a 50-50. But if they stay on for multiple years, if Trump accidentally actually destroys the dollar value and displaces the US, we'll still be formidable as far as like the world power goes, but we'll lose our dominance for sure. We'll go from being utterly dominant to formidable, which is quite the fall for someone who's been basically the emperor of the globe.